Committee Room 21. Sound.
The meeting. Welcome everyone to the 18th meeting of the Committee for Finance in the 2022 to 27 mandate. Members, the committee will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. So members, those in the public gallery, you are welcome to use your phones, but please make sure they are either on silent or airplane mode, and it is not permitted to take photographs or record any of the meeting. Agenda item 1 is apologies. We do have apologies from the Deputy Chair, Diane Forsyth. Several members have indicated that they will be joining us, thank you, via Zoom. So welcome to those members, and obviously they can indicate either on their screen or electronically to the clerk should they wish to ask a question. Agenda item 2 is the declaration of interests. Members are required to declare any relevant interests at the beginning of any meeting. Does anybody have any interest they wish to declare? No. Okay. Agenda item 3 is chairperson's business. On chairperson's business, I do want to raise something very important, which is that we have not, as of this precise moment, had any confirmation that the head of the civil service can appear in front of this committee next week. That is deeply, deeply disappointing. I would go so far as to say it is unacceptable. The stated reason is that the office, the Executive Office, the Office of the First and Deputy First Minister, have not confirmed that they are comfortable with, or they have not indicated that approval of her appearing. That is obviously routine practice that the relevant ministerial office is given sight of and agrees to senior civil servants appearing. We have now for literally months been talking about the importance of the head of the civil service briefing us on civil service reform, RHI matters and other matters pertaining to the civil service. We may stray into other broader questions about civil service performance, but I would say first of all it's important to say this meeting is extremely important. Our job as the Finance Committee is to scrutinise the work of the Department of Finance. The Department of Finance has a strategic policy role in terms of the civil service, and obviously the department used to be called the Department of Finance and Personnel. We're not able to do that job if we can't take evidence from the head of the civil service. Previous committees have taken evidence from other heads of the civil service. It is unacceptable that the First and Deputy First Minister or people operating on their behalf are effectively blocking the head of the civil service, it appears, from coming to give us evidence. She has been due for months, or for weeks certainly, to come and give us evidence next Wednesday, the 26th of June. I hope that can still happen. If it doesn't happen, it will be clear to the public why it hasn't happened. So I think it's important to put that on the record. I will be writing again to the Office of the First and Deputy First Minister to explain that it is unacceptable if the head of the civil service does not appear in front of us next week due to their failure to agree to it, and I'll be raising it via other channels should that not happen. This isn't a party political point. This is about my role as chair of this committee. It is an extreme discourtesy for us to be left in this position. I'm happy to take questions from other members. Owen Tennyson first, and then Steve Aiken.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to completely support on this occasion everything that you've said in relation to this issue. It is completely unacceptable that TEO have not granted the permission necessary for the head of civil service to come and present to committee. I actually spoke to a number of colleagues from the TEO committee during the week, and this isn't an isolated incident. It's a recurring theme in terms of sign-off not being granted and papers not being approved on time for committee to do their scrutiny work. It's unacceptable, it's dysfunctional, and in fairness, it is a joint office, so there are questions in terms of where that dysfunction is emanating from. So I would encourage you to write again, Chair, as you've suggested, and also ask for an explanation as to why this has taken so long.
Yes, we will be doing both of those things. I should say it is not beyond the wit of the head of the civil service to appear in front of us, but the courtesy and routine and customary practice is that the Executive Office give their approval. They haven't done that yet, so they are in effect blocking this evidence. Steve Aiken, and then pull through.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Chair, and obviously I support all your comments and remarks so far. Do we have to start dusting off the idea of compelling her to come in front of us?
At this stage, I don't want to have to go down that road, and I think that is, I think that would be a sort of last resort. We will take advice on what mechanisms, what legal mechanisms we need to take if the First and Deputy First Minister or those operating on their behalf are not willing to do the very basic courtesy of allowing us to do our job. Yes, we should explore all options. I hope that isn't required in the next week. Obviously, there's still 7 days for them to agree to this, but it's not optimal that we don't have our own, at a basic organisational level, we should have our forward work programme locked in weeks in advance. Paul Frew.
Yeah, just on this issue, I agree with Steve. We have the powers to compel witnesses before this committee. That's the one thing. We have waited long enough. How long do we wait further? So I would be quite supportive of making sure that the head of a civil service knows that we have the power to compel her to this finance committee. The other strand of this is that she does have the power to come here before this committee without the authority of the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister. I suggest she takes up that offer.
I would agree with that point.
And thirdly, how can the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister think that we as a committee could ever say that we have had appropriate, what's the word they use with regards to the accelerated passage of the budget? How could we have ever appropriate consultation if we can't even meet with the head of the civil service? So I think there's a lot of soul searching to be done in the next 7 days. Thank you.
Can I suggest, just on that the clerk and the team investigate what mechanism we may have to use to compel the head of the civil service to appear?
Chair, that would be what's called a section 44 to 46 of the Northern Ireland Act.
Yes.
Off the top of my head, I don't think anyone has got as far as actually activating it. It's a complex legal process. But what I would suggest, Chair, is if the committee are willing and you want to write to FM and DFM is referencing that there is a process there.
I think we should. I thought Section 44 was specifically in relation to information, but if it includes witnesses,
people and papers,
then we should certainly, I think, include that in our correspondence. Anybody else? Deirdre Hargey?
Yeah, no, I think just right back to them, just kind of outlining that Hawks has been here before in front of previous committees, and then, as you say, outline in terms of the options.
That is, I think, what we'll do. I think it's important to say we wrote to them on the 14th of May. So this is not. It's not that we haven't asked them. I mean, it's now at the point where this is beyond, I think, routine correspondence and is getting into extreme discourtesy to this committee. Statutory committees are just that. They have powers in statute under the Northern Ireland Act. They have a fundamental role in the devolved process. It is critically important to our work stream in the next few years that we hear evidence from the head of the civil service. It is profoundly unacceptable that we've been placed in this situation just days before a planned evidence session. So if they are watching this, and I hope if they aren't watching it, that someone passes it on to them, the very first thing that needs to happen is the First and Deputy First Minister need to cease and desist from blocking evidence to this committee. And if they won't, then the head of the civil service needs to appear before us anyway. We will be corresponding with them to that effect. Okay, I think we've made our point, and I hope good sense prevails in the next couple of days. Thank you. Now, the next agenda item is draft minutes of the meeting on the 12th of June. If members are content, they're a true reflection, I will sign those minutes.
Agreed.
We're agreed? Okay. The next agenda item is matters arising. So 5.1, page 16 of the meeting pack. At the meeting on 29th of May, the committee requested time frame for the Fiscal Council Bill and detail of the scope and timescale for the Financial Provisions Bill. The Department has indicated that the Minister is aiming to introduce the Fiscal Council Bill prior to the end of the year. However, there is still some further work required in the drafting process. It would be helpful to be kept abreast of that, obviously, on a rolling basis if that deadline is going to slip any further, because it was in the legislation programme which was presented to the Assembly via WMS a couple of weeks ago. So if it's going to slip further, I think we and indeed the wider Assembly need to be told. In relation to the Financial Provisions Bill, there is in relation to financial provisions. So there are a list of proposed provisions spanning 5 different departments, and that's been provided to us. There is a paper with the executive seeking agreement to the development of the bill. When agreement has been reached, the department intends to begin its engagement with the committee, but is happy to provide a briefing on the contents of the bill at any stage. So members, that's to note, and I think we will need a briefing on the financial provisions bill. It is quite a this will involve, I think, a lot of scrutiny because it's quite complicated stuff and it's important stuff. It will involve changes to a whole range of departments done through the Department of Finance, but we will need to have our wits about us. So yes, I think we should have an early briefing on that if people are content, early in when we return after recess. Item 5.2 is secondary legislation update, and that is at 17 of the meeting pack. At the meeting of the 29th of May, the committee agreed to request an urgent update on 2 statutory rules to make permanent legislative provision to allow for changes to civil registration legislation enabling electronic transfer of documents and registration of deaths and stillbirths by telephone. These rules need to be in operation by the 16th of September, which people will remember we have discussed in great detail, when existing temporary provisions fall. Members also requested a schedule of anticipated secondary legislation from the Department to allow for planning. So in relation to the SRs, the Department indicate that the GRO, the General Registry Office, intend to lay the rules in the Assembly Business Office on the 14th of June. Committee staff queried this with the DALO as they had not been laid and were told that an issue arose around specific vires very late in the day. Officials were advised to speak to the examiner of statutory rules. Yesterday, the committee office were emailed an update from the DALO, which can be found at item 5.10 of your tabled pack. The Department now advises that there has been an unavoidable delay. The Office of the Legislative Council has alerted the Department to an issue in relation to the sufficiency of the enabling legislation to make these provisions permanent. The examiner of statutory rules has agreed with this view. Therefore, primary legislation is required to make this change, as the committee suspected initially. The GRO will now seek an extension to the temporary provisions. Full details are outlined. However, an in-person briefing is offered by officials. So we will wish to discuss, I think, this. I will say, first of all, this is deeply disappointing, given we were very clearly told by the GRO that this would be done. First of all, that we wouldn't have to extend the temporary provisions under the Coronavirus Act again, and that is, I think we were reasonable in allowing a further extension on the basis that we were told. And we all, first of all, accept that the policy outcome is a reasonable and good one, but the extension, we were told that we wouldn't need to extend powers under the Coronavirus Act again. Now we're told we probably will be, and that they were wrong. I think this is probably an example of why we need to have, whatever people say, an assembly committee scrutinising what departments do. So we will get a briefing. Open it up to members. I assume Paul Frew will want to come in. Any others?
What a merry dance. What a merry dance. I just don't know what on earth have the Department, GRO and the Office of the Legislative Council been doing all this time. They were granted approval in January of this year to make these provisions permanent. It was refreshed with the arrival of the Minister. I opposed the question being put in this committee on the 14th of February until we seen a plan. A plan was produced, which is now not viable. What have they been doing in that time, and why has it taken them so long to bring this new information to light in this committee weeks from a recess? So I would suggest, Chair, that we have that presentation, it be before recess, and with them they bring the wording of the primary legislation. In many ways, a piece of primary legislation and the wording thereof should be far easier to obtain than a piece of secondary legislation. So I would expect to see the primary legislation which they are going to bring forward at that presentation, and also a timescale of where and how they are going to have this implemented before September 2024. Thank you.
So, do anyone else wish to come in on this issue? So, on the first of all, I agree. It is suboptimal at best. Obviously, I think we can. They will this is more likely to be, in my view, cock up rather than conspiracy. I can't see any particular reason why they will have wanted to give us what was turned out to be wrong information. In terms of whether we seek a briefing for them before the recess, I have no ideological opposition to us having a briefing from them before recess. Can I suggest that we come back to that in our forward work programme and we have a discussion then on the basis of what we are due to have in the next fortnight? We have 2 sessions left after today. Next week is, assuming the head of the civil service comes and briefs us, which we've just talked about. We have rather full plans in both of them. If we can manage a short but focused briefing on the subject, I'm not opposed to it. But can I suggest we discuss it at when we come on to the forward work programme discussion?
Also, Chair, just on that, I forgot to add that we would like to know the reasons, the actual technical reasons why the Office of Legislative Counsel do not see that the SRs were feasible. I have read the 3 pieces of legislation that they are trying to amend, and I've read them. Now, I'm not an expert with regards to that compared to the Office of Legislative Counsel, but would like to know the actual reasons laid out as to why they don't think secondary legislation is viable.
Indeed, and obviously, should we will be whether we get an oral briefing or not, we can ask for that information in written form. Can I suggest when we come back to the forward work program, we see where we can fit it in? As I say, I have no principled opposition to doing it. It's really a question of us fitting it in. We may be able to do that, and I don't have any objection to it if we can. Okay. Thank you very much. So we will move on. Next item is the interim fiscal framework. Members, at page 18 of the meeting pack, you will see this item. At the meeting on the 29th of May, the committee agreed to request updates on the interim fiscal framework at regular intervals, in particular notification when resourcing the work on a final framework is established and deployed. The department has outlined the staffing resource being utilised in relation to the interim fiscal framework and indicated that it will provide regular updates as appropriate. That is for members to update. That's for members to note that update at this stage. I would just say briefly, obviously, to repeat the point we had made last week about being disappointed that we had not had a specific update on the Public Sector Transformation Board, which is connected to the work of the fiscal framework. So just repeat that point, unless any member wishes to raise anything else about the fiscal framework. No. Okay. Next item is civil law reform. We're having some interesting musical repartee coming from the Eastern Car Park outside Stormont. In case people think that that's the Finance Committee, so we'll just close the window and everyone can sweat for the next little while until that noise removes itself. Following a briefing on civil law reform on the 29th of May, Steve Aiken asked officials if there was any potential interaction between the Singapore Convention and the Windsor Framework. The department has liaised with officials in the Ministry of Justice who have confirmed that there is no Windsor Framework issue at play, and full details are in the department's response. So, Steve Aiken, do you wish to come in on that?
Yeah, thanks. That's just for it's useful for clarification, and there's some nuances there, but I've noted it, duly noted. Thank you.
Okay. There is a civil law matter which has come to my attention, which relates to some, but I will bring it up at the end of these matters arising. Item 5.5, centrally held budgetary items and other items described as earmarked. People will remember that on the 29th of May, we noted a written ministerial statement from the Education Minister regarding early learning and childcare measures. After discussing the contents of the statement, the committee agreed to request an update from the Department of Finance on timescales and parameters for the dispersal of centrally held budgetary items and other items being held at the centre described as earmarked, as referenced in the Minister of Finance's Budget 24-25 statement. The Department has indicated that the funding held centrally for allocation will be addressed as part of the June monitoring round. In addition, the Department also state that the amount held for RRI interest payments reflect the interest payments due to the National Loan Funds in respect of borrowing under the Reinvestment and Reform Initiative. I suppose that should be relatively obvious, but does anybody wish to make any comment on that? I think that's useful additional information for us. Okay, that's to note at this point, but obviously we would, whenever the Education Minister makes any more dispersals or policy decisions relating to the centrally held childcare monies, I think we are keen to hear about that because it's such an item of high priority. 5.6, disciplinary matters relating to the RHI inquiry. Members, please note the restricted marking and classification of the paper from the department, and obviously reflect that in terms of any oral contributions today. The committee agreed to write to the to request further detail on and the timeline for changes to the civil service disciplinary policy, which was scheduled for implementation during 24-25. Clarification was also requested on the current position in relation to changes to the Code of Conduct and the Code of Ethics. Such an update has been provided. Full details can be found in today's tabled pack. The Department indicates that the discipline policy is subject to consultation with Central Trade Union side, so, quote, it is not fitting to set out the detail of the proposed policy changes at this point. A definitive timeline for policy changes during 24-25 cannot be provided due to, quote, several associated variables. In relation to the Code of Ethics, the annual review for 2024 is underway. I don't think this is particularly acceptable, to be honest, as a response, because I think it's a bit of a brush-off. I think it's particularly a brush-off when we are not getting the head of the civil service to come before us. It may be the case whenever any policy is under development, whether that relates to civil service discipline or revenue raising, that officials and either ministers or others, if it relates to internal civil service matters, will not want to tell absolutely everything to a statutory committee as policy is being developed. That is not unreasonable. This response brushes us off and does not even give us indicative thematic pointers in terms of what's happening in this area. So it's not acceptable. It's a brush off, and that brush off is particularly egregious in the context of us not knowing whether we're going to get a briefing from the head of the civil service or not. I respect that consultation. It is definitely vital. There's rigorous consultation with the trade union side on developing these. There is nothing about, I would love to meet, I don't think any trade unionist would object to us being told the broad thematic areas that are being looked at. Indeed, I'm sure most trade unionists think we have a pretty important job to do in terms of scrutinising this and welcome the fact that there is a department, that there's a committee that is scrutinising it. I just don't think that's an acceptable response at all. But I'm happy to hear others' contributions. Steve Aiken.
Look, Chair, I'm getting increasingly annoyed here with the theme of what's coming, and we're being told time and time again, this is a complete and utter brush off. How can we say that we're supposed to look at sort of the impacts of RHI and whether the things have been changed and whether the NICS has changed its culture or not? We're getting a brush off like this. It's quite frankly, it's not acceptable. And I think I don't know how the other members of the committee feel, but this is not right, and I'm not happy.
I think there's several things about the response which are not good enough. I think the idea that discussions with the trade union, with the central trade union side, are a reason not to even give indicative or thematic responses in terms of what is being looked at is not acceptable. Nor is it acceptable to simply say we are planning on implementing changes at some point during 2024-25, but we can't provide a definitive timeline. We just have to be quite robust in saying that kind of response isn't acceptable. Paul Frew.
Simply just to echo everything, Chair, you've said and everything that Steve has said, I echo it completely. Okay.
I think we can go back with quite a robust response in my view, unless, and I think this is important. It's
I think just to get information, no problem with getting that, but it is just conscious that there is ongoing negotiations with the unions then, so it's just finding where that balance is in the midst of it, in terms of what's even expected or at what point those negotiations are. So I mean, if no problem going back, it's just how robust you go back at this point, and the impact that would have, because we don't have all of the information. Granted, that's part of the issue, but I mean, we could be taking a sledgehammer to crack a nut here, so let's get the additional information and then see what we need to do.
I think part of the reason why I feel very robustly about this one is, first of all, they don't actually say it's a negotiation. I think they would be very clear about saying that they don't negotiate with the trade unions on disciplinary matters. Trade unionists would probably say they should be negotiating more. It's a consultation. and I don't think a consultation. So lots of consultations happen about lots of policies, about lots of things. Consultations don't have to happen in the dead of night or in private. But I accept you're right that I'm perfectly happy just to ask for greater information. I think we put on the record our concerns.
Just to add to that, the way I agree with Steve, the trends here, we're only months into this, and the trends here, it feels like we are having to scrutinise with sledgehammers. That's exactly what it feels like.
I would make the point that whenever you ask for relatively innocuous information, and so, for example, whenever we asked for information in relation to LPS, or what was looked at in terms of revenue raising, we did have to push. The information was given to us on a restricted basis, even though most of it is relatively innocuous and not particularly politically sensitive at all in terms of consultation responses. It was requested that we have a briefing in closed session. We did all that. That information was useful to us in terms of doing our scrutiny job. That information has not been compromised. Not that even if it was compromised, it would be particularly politically sensitive. I think it's really important that we just, put on the record the importance of our role. We are a statutory committee. We're not a school debating society. Anyway, I think we've made our point. The next item is Owen Tennyson wished to come in. Apologies, Owen. Go ahead.
Just very briefly, Chair. I'm tempted to agree more so with Deirdre on this particular issue in terms of requesting further information. I think looking at our request, we asked for further detail and the timeline for changes. We haven't necessarily asked a specific question in terms of asking the department to outline the nature of any proposed changes, and so I think giving them the opportunity to clarify in the first instance might be helpful. But look, I think the point's been well rehearsed already.
I think we've made the point. We are asking them for the information, but fair enough. I think we've all put our points in the record related to that. And the next is 5.9, which is in relation to banking hubs. At the meeting on the 5th. 5.7. My apologies. I'm jumping ahead excitedly. Such as the warm weather is getting to me. 5.7 is queries on the business case addendum seeking approval to revise non-domestic RHI tariffs, which is page 4 of the tabled pack. At the meeting on the 22nd of May, the committee agreed to seek details of the department's queries in relation to the business case addendum, which sought approval to revise the tariffs for the non-domestic RHI tariff in November 23. Members would then decide what further action they wish to take. So the department has provided detail of the 7 occasions when DOF officials have written to DFE officials to require clarification and supplementary information in relation to the business case addendum, which sought to revise the small and medium biomass tariffs for the non-domestic RHI scheme. DOF officials are currently reviewing the latest response from DFE and have indicated they will continue to engage with DFE counterparts to conclude their review of the 2023 business case addendum in order to be in a position to provide approval for the preferred option. So that information is to note, unless anybody wishes to come in.
Chair, so first of all, it seems amazing that the Department of Finance has to write 7 times over a period of 7 months. I think it is to actually obtain details. Now I know it's asked for further correspondence, further details, but there does seem to be a certain overlap there in regards to what information the Department of Finance was receiving. But one thing I don't see here is the actual responses. So DOF have told us that they requested further information on such and such, but they don't actually offer up the responses from the Department of Economy. I would like to also see that to finish the jigsaw.
Okay, Steve Aiken.
Yeah, just exactly as I was just going to raise the point Paul raised. As the rest of it, that doesn't we're only getting one side of the correspondence. It's nearly as if they didn't want it to see what the response was.
Yes, well, I mean, I think having been, Deirdre, how you want to?
They're saying they're reviewing it and to look to see if it meets or satisfactorily addresses the queries. So we can just go back and ask for extra clarification. There doesn't have to be a big conspiracy. But they are in the middle of reviewing it. I mean, obviously, yes, it has been over a couple of months, so I take on board that point. Obviously, that was before the Assembly was up and running again as well. But they have the information now, so maybe it would be good to see when that review's finished and then to furnish us with the information.
I think in relation to this one, I will say there does seem to be a more more normal kind of process of policy development, but I'm happy for us to write and ask for further information. They have told us when they've corresponded. I think it's been, they've given us more information on this one, in fairness, than some of the previous items, but I'm happy for us to write and on the basis that we've discussed and ask for that further information. And obviously the policy is being developed, and RHI, I think in the legislative programme they said there would be some legislation on RHI, so we'll keep abreast of that, or the Economy Committee will, in addition to us. Okay.
Not to step on the toes of the Scrutiny Committee for the Economy, but there is a duty on the Department of Economy that was given in law, and it will affect the budget. Yes, it will.
Okay, I think those points are well made. Next item is the ministerial advice on work and announcements during the pre-election period. That's at page 6 of the table pack. At the meeting on the 5th of June, members agreed to request information from the department on what specific advice the Minister of Finance had been given on the appropriateness or otherwise of progressing work or making announcements in the pre-election period. The department has provided this information, and full details are outlined in the department's response. So this is just something that's fairly summary. Fair enough. There is a document. I suppose the only thing that I noted was just slightly jarred or just caught my eye was that they say is that the minister or departments are advised to avoid competition with candidates for the attention of the public. It's interesting that it says candidates rather than parties, but I'm not minded to think there's any particular conspiracy there. But that's to note unless anybody wants to raise any query. Grand. Okay, that was useful. The next item is banking hubs. So that's at page 7 of the table pack. On the 5th of June, we agreed to request information from the department on a number of issues related to banking hubs. The department has provided details on the Minister's disappointment in relation to the limited rollout of banking hubs. The detail of an evaluation carried out on the original banking hub concept, as well as cash access UK annual review on the impact of banking hubs and detail of interactions and transactions at the Kilkeel banking hub. As you might guess from the specificity of that one, that was the thing that the Deputy Chair particularly asked for. There are other useful updates on the hubs at Cumber, Newcastle, Port Rush and Warren Point, and we have taken as an action, we agreed at our strategic day that we are doing more work on financial services generally, and that is something that we're going to be obviously revisiting after recess. So this will be one of the things that we look at, and we'll obviously the Deputy Chair herself may wish to re-raise it at a future meeting.
Chair, would it be appropriate if members were in agreement to bring it back next week so the Deputy Chair can make reference to specific issues?
Members are happy with that? Yes, that's fine. We'll use that opportunity. Okay. Next item is Public Sector Transformation Board, I should say. At the meeting on the 5th of June, members raised a number of issues in relation to the PSTB and agreed to schedule an oral briefing on the 3rd of July. As members will recall, this session was brought forward to the 26th of June. Therefore, a further updated briefing pack will be supplied by the department in time for that session. It's indicated that this paper will address members' queries raised at both the 5th of June and last week's meeting, so members will have an opportunity to question officials then. So we'll have that opportunity then, unless anybody wishes to raise a point now. We will be discussing it next week. Okay. Great. I had one item I just wanted to raise as a matter of arising, which is in relation to civil law. I asked in a written question, asked the Department of Finance about the issue of strategic litigation. I should, by the way, declare an interest as the founder chair of the All-Party Group in Press Freedom. I asked the Department of Finance, the Minister of Finance, a question on strategic lawsuit against public participation. She did provide a useful answer. Part of that useful answer was that there is a UK, so civil law sits within the Department of Finance. We have had just a briefing in the last number of weeks from the department on civil law, including the defamation regime. But there is a UK SLAPS task force which is facilitated by the UK Ministry of Justice. Unusually, the Department of Justice are the officials who sit on the UK SLAPS task force, despite the fact that civil justice not being a matter for the UK, for the Northern Ireland Department of Justice. I think there's quite a concerning anomaly there. But I'm not saying it's profoundly I don't mean to be conspiratorial, but I have raised this question before, but the slight anomaly of civil justice sitting in finance rather than the Department of Justice, given that there are, in most other common law jurisdictions on these islands, civil and criminal justice are located in the same department, and just a slight concern that policy might fall through the gaps. This would worry me that this may be something where it's falling through the gaps, so I would like, with members' agreement, for us to write to both the Department of Finance and the Department of Justice to ask how they basically their view on this anomaly. The Minister of Finance did give me a very helpful answer in her written answer, in which she says the Department of Finance has a policy interest in SLAPs to the extent that they relate to defamation. However, the Department of Finance, which owns civil law, does not sit on the UK SLAPs task force, which is on its face strange. I would like to know what the two departments are doing to address that anomaly, and does it have any impact on policy development, if people are content?
So not only policy development, Chair, but also legislative change. So it was me that asked the questions around SLAP in the presentation with the officials.
Yes.
So you can imagine in this mandate there will be opportunities to bring forward amendments. So would it be difficulty then that if a Justice Minister brings a bill forward that she could rule that out of scope, or the powers that be would rule that out of scope simply because the power resides in the Department of Finance?
I mean, I think that's an important question. That's something we need addressed. I mean, I would also say, slightly in parenthesis, that obviously given the Department of Justice is currently refusing to confirm whether it's going to appeal a law, which is all media organisations are extremely concerned about, and think has a chilling effect on reporting on very important issues. There is a potential conflict there, but that's a point I'm making in an individual capacity. I think if people are content, I think we should get clarity on that potential anomaly. Okay, people are content, we'll move on. So the next item is in closed session, so if we could flick the switch.
Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room 21. Signed. 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 Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room 21. Signed. 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 Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room 21. Signed. 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 Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room 21. Sound.
I don't think we are. I think he's gone.
I think he has, because he's left no stuff, Philip.
He might come back for this point, I think. I don't know,
Aye.
maybe he thought the training.
He has his work experience
Yeah.
with him as well. So
Thank you. Are we back on
We're
then?
open now, yeah.
we're on.
Okay. Welcome back to those who are online. We welcome back. So we've got to, before we do that, we have to get agreement to follow up on the scrutiny points in our private raised briefing. We will.
Members are content.
Members are content. We will go and do that. Yep. What we discussed in closed session. So we now have a briefing session on the main estimates, the statement of excesses, the budget number 2 bill. We're getting an oral briefing from Departmental Finance officials, and if members are agreed, we will get Hansard will record this.
Was here.
Although the gentleman from Hansard is not with us.
Did he go away entirely? I just said to him, stay out.
We will find.
We will find
out.
Yeah.
It is possible that Hansard can go back and
They can do that.
They can go back and watch it online. So you can't say anything unbelievably interesting and controversial and then pretend that we can't pause momentarily.
Pause momentarily, Chair, because I'd be very keen to make sure we have answered. They do a special recording.
We just go into closed session just while we wait.
Do you want to go to correspondence very
Yes,
quickly?
okay, let's go to correspondence. That's fine.
Apologies.
Sorry, we will make our witnesses apologies to our witnesses. We will
Let me just
crack on and do that, and then we can come back once we have Hansard. Okay, we'll find out where Hansard are. So members, if you look at the correspondence, starting at page 359 of our pack, there are 4 items. I'm going to draw people's attention to them. Just shout as we go, as it were, if you wish to make a comment or ask for anything additional, any of these. 8.1 is correspondence to the Committee for Communities regarding the extension of automatic enrolment. At page 359 of the pack, members will find correspondence from the Department of Finance to the Communities Committee. The committee had written to the department to ask about potential costs of extending automatic pension enrolment to younger workers. The department has indicated there are no such cost implications. That's simply to note, unless anyone wishes to come in.
Noted.
Noted, okay. Committee for the Economy, Hospitality Sector, devolution of VAT and business rates. At page 361 of the meeting pack, there's correspondence from the Economy Committee. The Economy Committee has written to both the Finance Minister and the Economy Minister in respect of a suggested VAT reduction pilot and regarding alternative business rate models and rural rates relief. These queries followed an oral evidence session, from Hospitality Ulster. It's anticipated the Finance Minister's response to the Economy Committee will be copied to this committee, so that's just a note, unless anybody wishes to come in. Okay. Examiner of Statutory Rules, 18th report is at 372 of the meeting pack. There are no rules, rules referenced in this report relevant to the committee, so that's just a note. 8.4 is the NI Federation of Housing Associations Social Housing Development Programme Budget 24-25. Page 380 of the pack, members will find correspondence from the NI, Federation of Housing Associations, which is also written to the social housing. It's also written to this committee in relation to the proposed budget for social housing development programme 24-25. The NIFA has asked the committee to consider how the social housing development programme can receive additional funding. Obviously, it's important to say that this is primarily for the Communities Committee. We don't go through I would put on the record in a personal context that I think there's a real crisis here in terms of funding, particularly of social housing. The social housing starts in this financial year are shockingly low. I put that on the record, but we will forward that correspondence from the Communities Committee and keep a watching brief on it as a policy area, unless anybody else wishes to come in.
Just to echo the concerns, in terms of the budget and the impact that's going to have.
Yeah, okay, so members will forward that to the Communities Committee. Right, the next and final item of correspondence links to a previous item, which is correspondence from the CEO of Hospitality Ulster, who has requested an opportunity to present to the committee on, quote, the critical economic state of the hospitality industry. So members, I am content for us in principle to have a briefing. I think we may wish to seek other participants in that briefing rather than simply Hospitality Ulster, but I acknowledge the very real challenges that the hospitality sector faces. My party, purely it's not a political point, but we happen to bring a motion on the VAT issue, but it's much broader than that, so I acknowledge that. But we can, if members are content, we'll seek to find a slot for that in September. I think it would be difficult to do it before recess.
And to look at our forward work programme, because there will be other critical sectors that are facing the same impacts, and just so that we're fair as a committee to all of them.
Definitely, I think that's totally fair.
But to look at that, obviously they've put the request in, and that's fair enough, but I would agree also to widen it beyond Hospitality Ulster as well.
I think that's fair. I think we have to be, given that we've just said, on NIFA, that's a matter for the Communities Committee. We can't simply pick favourites. So we will think when we talk to come to the forward work programme, we will discuss how best to reflect.
I think Hospitality Ulster was up in the department or the Community Economic Committee, so it might, if they had Hansard, it might be good to have that in advance.
Useful.
Okay. In any case, we will forward that, or we will come back to that point. Now we're going to go back to our oral evidence. We're very patient. We have very senior officials whose time is very, very important. And apologies for keeping you waiting. We appreciate your patience. So thank you for that. Genuinely. We have Joanne McBurney from the Department of Finance, along with Angela Ross and Patrick Neeson. So Joanne, obviously well known to us, Deputy Secretary from the Public Spending Directorate. Patrick Neeson, Head of Supply Division, and Angela Ross, who is also from Supply in the Public Spending Division. Thank you very much again. Thank you for your patience. Members, at the meeting on the 5th of June, we asked for confirmation of how far the 65% vote in account provision would take departments into the current financial year, i.e. when will the budget provided for in the vote in account run out, and for information on the consequences should the committee not grant accelerated passage. This is the habitual question we always ask: what happens if we don't do this? In advance of today's session, officials have highlighted that both of these points are addressed in paragraphs 24 to 26 of the briefing paper supplied in advance of today's session, which is page 33 of the meeting pack. I've noted your patience. Thank you very much, and we'd like you to make an opening statement. Joanne, or indeed anybody else.
Thanks, Chair. Patrick will make the opening remarks, and then we're all available to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just make some brief opening remarks just to give the committee time to raise any questions members might then have. So, as the committee be aware, the budget bill is based on the main estimates for 2024-25, and the main estimates position sets out the departmental spending plans for the year based on the budget 24-25 that was agreed by the executive in April. And so the estimates are set out in a detailed document that's been provided to the committee, hopefully. So the budget number 2 bill provides the legal authority for departments to incur expenditure and use resources as set out in the main estimates. Also allows the Assembly to hold departments accountable for managing the resources within the limits authorised. So I know that one of the considerations for the committee is whether to agree to accelerated passage to the bill. And as you know, we rely on accelerated passage to ensure that it reflects the executive's up-to-date expenditure plans, and also to ensure departments have access to the cash required to deliver services based on those expenditure plans. And I know that this is something the committee is routinely asked for and does agree to, and both yourselves as officials and the Minister are appreciative of the committee's support in relation to that. So until the budget number 2 bill receives royal assent, departments are constrained by the spending limit set out in the voting account contained in the Budget Act that was passed earlier this year. And members will be aware that the Budget Act provided legislative cover for cash and resources based on 65% of last year's position.
Is it possible to say, as of now, so 65% is the overdraft limit? That's a very probably cringeworthy analogy to use. That's the overdraft limit as it is now. Where are we? Say I'm someone who is, say I'm a student who is an overdraft and is worried about how much they can spend that overdraft. Where are we as of now, and when do we run out of it?
We couldn't, sorry, Patrick, jump in.
I know I'm asking a complicated question because you know detailed departmental returns, but
it's not even that it's a complicated question to explain. It's just something that we wouldn't actually have in front of us. The answer: each 65% of each department, and it will be different for each department depending just on how much cash they have drawn down at this point in time. Now, we could provide that number if we did a bit of analysis, but it's very hard to predict. That would tell you where they are today. It is also very hard to use that to predict where they will be in a month's time or 2 months' time, because there's peaks and troughs in the expenditure of departments. So it's very difficult to predict the point at which a department will run out of cash, other than to say our estimate is that it will be around the time we think that the budget bill will receive royal assent. I think for some departments it will be very tight. Is that fair, Patrick?
Yeah, we've done some analysis to look at how quickly departments may draw down the cash to see if it happened at the kind of same pace as last year. We think departments might start around September, October.
So I think you indicated in an earlier session, I couldn't remember when, that you obviously had hoped to bring budget number 2 bill before the summer. It was your hope that you'd have royal assent over the summer, or did you always expect that it would be final stage would be pushed into September?
Yeah. We always expected that final stage would be put to September because of summer recess. What we hoped to do was to introduce it before summer recess.
Right. Okay. I'll let you go on with your statement.
No, sorry, thank you. So as we say, members, the Budget Act provides cover for cash and resources based on 65% of last year's position. So that reflects the time in the budget bill, as we've discussed. So as the committee is aware, supply resolutions debate is scheduled for the Assembly Monday 1st of July. This will seek Assembly approval for the main estimates for 24-25 and the statement of excesses, and they relate to several items over a number of different years, and we've provided details of those statements of excesses to the committee. In terms of those, the Public Accounts Committee recommended that the relevant cash and resources be provided at its meeting the 21st of March this year, so we're acting in response to the committee's recommendation in relation to those excesses. The main estimates also highlight those areas that rely on the sole authority of the Budget Act, and as members know, for the vast majority spent by departments, it's done in the authority of statutory powers that have been provided through legislation. So that's not possible. Managing public money explains it may be possible for departments to rely on the Budget Act alone for certain expenditure with Department of Finance approval, and that's under certain conditions that the committee will be familiar with. Ensure the service lasts more than 2 years or expenditure no more than $1.5 million in a year. So again, those instances where that occurs in terms of sole authority have been detailed in the briefing paper we've provided to the committee. So as members will see from that, there are some occasions where the amounts for which approval has been sought are greater than the £1.5 million limit. For several of these, legislation has been developed that we know of. For example, the Planned Financial Provisions Bill will capture a number of those, particularly those in relation to the Executive Office. And then just finally, as committee members will be aware, the positions set out in the main estimates will change during the year as a result of decisions taken through in-year monitoring rounds. And these changes will be reflected in supplementary estimates and associated budget bill that will be brought forward toward the end of the financial year, usually in February. So that's open remarks. Just happy to take any questions then.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and giving us a briefing. And again, to be Bridges, thank you for being patient. I know you were waiting outside and then you had to listen to us go through our correspondence. That was not designed to be a punishment. It was just purely happenstance. Right. June monitoring. What's the crack? How much is going to be doled out of June monitoring?
Okay, to comment on the timing of June monitoring first, and then I'll talk about the funding available. So we had a discussion the last time I was here, and that things I suppose have a little more clarity now. So the Finance Minister wrote to the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister on the 30th of May, seeking an executive meeting on the 27th of June to agree the June monitoring round. This was raised again at last week's executive, and subsequently the Minister wrote again to the First Minister and Deputy First Minister last Friday, the 14th of June, outlining the need for clarity for departments in June monitoring. As departments are currently considering the actions that will be required to live within their budget, it's important to provide certainty on any further allocations as soon as possible.
Just want to understand that, Joanne, the Finance Minister is ready to present a June monitoring to the Executive, but the Executive Office or people within it have not agreed to it going on the agenda yet.
We haven't got a date set for it yet, and the Finance Minister would be ready for that meeting of the 27th of June.
She has requested 27th of June, or that has been agreed?
She has suggested the 27th of June, and that would be her preferred date to consider it.
She has to wait basically on the First and Deputy First Minister to agree to that?
We need the Executive to agree to a date for that.
Yeah. Is there a specific objection you're aware of? Or?
Not that I'm aware of. Now, you will be, and you raised the last time, the pre-election guidance, and the Finance Minister has considered the relevant guidance and is of the view that the June monitoring round is normal and routine business of the Executive, and given that need to provide certainty to departments, it's appropriate to proceed with the June monitoring round during the pre-election period. So that is the Minister is very keen to provide that certainty. And
are you so there's a couple of people come in, obviously indicate on the quantum. We obviously talked about there's quite a big range because you're waiting on estimates from London, which can't be laid until there's a new government or until there's a parliament for a start. Are we to expect monitoring on the basis of what we think will be 200 million plus, or could be 200 million plus, or are we going to get a much smaller 65 million monitoring round?
As you referred to, as we've discussed previously, we had been expecting significant Barnett consequentials as a result of the Westminster main estimates.
Yes.
Fortunately, Parliament was prorogued before those main estimates were introduced, and that means there's the potential for the amounts to change if an incoming government takes different decisions. As I said before, departments are now taking the decisions necessary to live within their budget, so it is important that they get confirmation of any available funding as soon as possible. Again, having considered the position, the Finance Minister has now indicated that she is willing to accept a degree of risk to provide allocations to the Department based on the assumptions around those previously indicated amounts.
Degree of risk would indicate that we're going to get this money from London, so I'm going to disperse this money on the basis of what I think we're getting. Is there any pre-election risk there? I mean, if the Finance Minister is judging that a June monitoring round is normal and routine, is it normal and routine to say, well, I think I'm going to get 200 million quid from the Treasury, therefore wouldn't it be the case that a more normal and routine thing to do would be to be on the cautious side and say, well, what I legally know I definitely have is this amount, which is about 65 million, but the bigger amount that I might expect or assume I'm going to get that's not normal and routine because that isn't certain yet.
I don't think there's any impact on the pre-election guidance. I mean, it would be normal sometimes to make assumptions on things, and you have to weigh up the pros and cons of both approaches. And I think given what we know about where departments are with the pressures they're facing, given that we know that Treasury had indicated this money would be in that ballpark, there may be changes. They're not, I would imagine, likely to be huge changes because Westminster departments will still be facing the same pressures regardless of which government is in charge. So I think it's reasonable to make assumptions at this stage, and the need to provide certainty to department to avoid two risks. The risk that departments either don't make decisions and that leads to potential overspends, or the risk that departments take decisions that they would not then need to make once they get an allocation. I think that outweighs any risks around those assumptions that would be made around the level of funding. So I think that certainty sort of outweighs any of the other risks, and it's important to give that certainty to departments.
If I was playing devil's advocate, I might say that the risk would be kind of 10 days worth of risk rather than, and it's possibly unlikely they're going to run out of cash in 10 days, given that what we know about the cash position is sort of, if we think it's stable enough until September at least, or even if that's a bit tight, are they really going to be under that much pressure within a sort of 10-day window between? It's
not about the running out of cash, it's about the decisions that they need to make now to live within budget. So as we found out in 23-24, the later and 22-23, the later you leave it in the year to make decisions, either the harsher those decisions are or you're not able to make decisions. So
the accounting officers themselves could bear that risk, though. Like they could. So the Finance Minister is bearing a degree of risk, is saying, I'm willing to take the risk that this money is going to come in main estimates from London, and maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, a bit more if it's a different government. The alternative to that would be saying you or someone else in the department saying, or even saying to the relevant accounting officers, we are relatively certain that we are going to be able to disperse more money. You can read the runes, you can see where everything is. You don't have to read the runes, you can see all the statements. So accounting officers themselves could make. No?
That would not be a position I would be comfortable with, because each accounting officer could make the decision that the full amount of money was going to come their way, and that puts us at a huge risk of overspend. Okay. I think the clarity is there. The executive as whole, and the finance minister will make her assumption on what the risks are, informed by our advice, and then bring that to the executive. I think my advice would be that the risk is relatively low, because as well as the main estimates coming through, there's routinely additional funding comes through later in the year.
Okay, Grant. And we know it'll be at least 200 million then. So it'll be. I mean, that we've talked about that number so often that it'll be
the amount allocated. Yes, would be.
And it'll be closer to 300, 200.
I don't think it would be close to 300. I think it would probably be somewhere
closer
in
to
the middle.
200. Okay, that's
somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle. Okay, that's a little. Sounds like Bruce Forsyth and take your pick. Okay. So just on a couple of other points in relation to the statement of excesses and the bill. Just on the statement of excesses, there are a few different ones here of different sizes. The largest one would appear to be the teacher superannuation variation, which is £11 million. Is there anything we should be concerned about, or is that simply a kind of an accounting issue to do with the pension superannuation position?
I mean, we pressed the Department of Education around that because it occurs twice in relation to the teachers' pension scheme for 2 years, and in relation to that they talked about a new financial system that they've introduced, and how the outturn of that just arrived too late for an actuarial review. So by the time the review happened in 2022, some of these additional charges needed to be taken into account. It just arrived too late to be captured in time, I suppose. So, I mean, in terms of the excesses, they're put to the CNIG, put to the PAC. They make recommendations. So, if there's any issues that they think departments need to take into account, it's the PAC will kind of make recommendations to the department in relation to those if they have any concerns.
Sure. Okay. We'll go to members now. Steve Aiken first, and then Deirdre. Steve? Dr. Aiken?
Thanks, Joanne. Thanks, Bob. Just two, and I think most of them you've already answered most of the questions. So obviously, we're looking at potentially an autumn statement or an autumn budget, and bearing in mind where we are with monitoring round, I take it we'll be looking at a budget number 3 bill this year as well. First question.
Yeah, at this stage, I wouldn't anticipate that. You can never rule anything out. You're absolutely right. There will be a fiscal event. There will be an autumn statement, and there may be there will have to be a spending review. The uncertainty is as to whether that is a 1-year spending review or a multi-year spending review. Those spending reviews will tend to look forward and not for this year. It's too early to say whether there'll be any additional funding coming through the autumn statement, but I think we would be able to wrap that up in the normal budget bill and associated supplementary estimates. But always keep our options open when we don't know what's going to happen.
Thanks for that. And the second question is, if the June monitoring doesn't go in front of the executive, the next executive, there's only one left before we reach summer recess, isn't there?
I'm not sure what the dates are that have been set for the executive yet, but I would think that if it doesn't go at a scheduled meeting, given the importance of this, I would hope that there would be an additional meeting called. But we're waiting on clarity on the timing of the executive meetings for the discussion of the June monitoring round.
And just for clarification, we're still waiting until after the if we had any indication from Treasury, how soon after the sort of the 4th of July we'll get the main estimates.
We have no indication yet from Treasury, and to be fair to Treasury, I would imagine they won't know until they know who the incoming government is and they brief their ministers. I don't think we would want to wait for that outcome. I think we'd be happy to proceed in advance of that to provide that clarity for departments on the funding available. Okay,
thanks, Joanne. Cheers. Thanks all. That's all, Chair.
Okay, Deirdre Hargey.
Yeah, no, thanks very much to the three of you. So obviously at the minute there's an assumption or ballpark of around 200 to 250 million that could be allocated. Obviously the Finance Minister has wrote twice to have that, and that could be allocated next Thursday.
Yes.
And it has been blocked from getting on the executive, or it hasn't appeared on the executive. Has there been any further information requests that have come back from TEO or additional info, or is it just...
Not that I'm aware of.
So there's been no response
No.
to those two requests?
No, certainly no response given any clarity on the timing.
Okay, and I think you touched on, I was going to ask Joanne in terms of the impact of not moving ahead, because I just know even in terms of organisations that are funded by departments, there's end dates at the end of this month, so there's critical issues there in terms of workers out there who are doing work with some of the most vulnerable. But I'm assuming that some of the requests for the funding that's come in June monitoring is, for example, the education workers in terms of the pay and grading review, health obviously around that as well. So we would be keen to see these things allocated, as you say, to give certainty to departments. And you already answered my other question then around, I suppose if it doesn't happen by next week, what the impact could be, or is there the space for an additional meeting? But you've already said the longer that this goes on, there's a concern around departments and their ability then to plan and spend.
Yeah, I think even a small delay can have an impact, and it is that twofold. As I said, it's either increases the risk of overspend or leads to decisions being made which may not need to be made if departments had that. And it's very hard for departments themselves to judge how much money they would get out of a monitoring round, because it's ultimately for the executive to decide on that. Yeah. And I suppose it will come as no surprise, I can't get into the details of bids, but as you would expect, the bids we've received far outweigh the funding available, so there are decisions to be taken on that.
Yeah, but we could allocate 250 million potentially next Thursday.
Yes, the Finance Minister has indicated that she's willing to proceed based on the information that she's already got and allocate that amount of money.
Okay, all through.
Yes, thank you, Joanne. So it seems to be that everything here at the minute is being done on risk. 4 weeks ago, we had accumulated up about $250 million to distribute. Last week, you said that the only real hard cash that was there available at this present time was the 60 million, thereabouts. That's a big range at risk.
It's the full amount wouldn't be at risk, because Treasury had provided indications of what we could anticipate at those Westminster main estimates. We have looked at that. We have provided advice on that. We have looked at the overall position. Our advice would be, and the Finance Minister has considered herself, and her position would be that the risk of proceeding at this is relatively small, given what we know and where we think we are with the financial position. The risk of not proceeding is much greater, given that need to provide clarity to departments. And I mean, Chair will know I do tend to take a prudent approach on these things. We have had discussions on that previously, so it's a position I would be comfortable with.
If for say something did go wrong, and I understand why you are moving forward in this, but something did go wrong and some of that $250 million didn't appear, how do we rectify that? Is it the October monitoring round, or is it a device before that?
Again, our options would be open. It could be the October monitoring round. We could do something earlier if needs be, but we'd also have to look at the likelihood of further funding becoming available at a later stage in the financial year. For example, one of the things that Treasury has indicated is that we would get Barnett consequentials for pension increases for non-civil service pay bodies in the main estimates, but the civil service increases will come at supplementary estimates. So there is still that chance that even if it doesn't come in the main estimates, funding could come at a later point, so we would need to weigh all of that up before we took any action. And that has all been done in reaching the conclusion that we are happy to proceed to allocate that amount of money at this point.
Is the 27th of June the preferred date for the Finance Minister?
The 27th of June has been the preferred date, and as I say, Finance Minister wrote on the 30th of May setting that out.
Right, okay. So there's a duty on the Finance Department to publish the outcome of each monitoring round within 7 days of it being approved by the Executive Committee. So if it's the 27th, that means the 4th of July. There's a duty on the Department of Finance to publish. 14 days after that, there's a duty on the Department or the Minister of Finance to lay before the Northern Ireland Assembly a statement specifying the changes to each department's net budget allocation as a result of this exercise. So I take it that statement then would have to be made in September.
I would imagine that could be done by written ministerial statement. That would be the usual. That would be the usual process for that, because it's a technical statement.
Right, okay. So you don't foresee any problems with that with regards to recess?
No, I think if we went ahead with the 27th of June, it would allow the Assembly statement and debate, or it's not a debate, but an oral statement in the Assembly before recess, whereas if we delay after the 27th of June, there won't be that ability for the Assembly to discuss it. It would be done via a written ministerial statement, or the Assembly would have to be recalled. So I think the 27th of June works from an Assembly point as well, to allow that discussion and question and answers after an oral statement.
So when you say a written statement to be laid before the Northern Ireland Assembly, can that written statement be laid in recess?
Yes.
Yeah. But then there is no recourse for questions.
Exactly, whereas if it happened on the 27th of June, we could do an oral statement and that would allow those questions to be asked. Now, if it was done during recess, I imagine the Finance Minister would be more than happy to come back in September, but by which point we're nearly at the October monitoring round and we're sort of past the post. It would obviously be much better from that scrutiny point of view to have it happening immediately.
So while she seeks agreement in the executive for the 27th, she doesn't necessarily have to wait the 7 days and then the 14 days to make that statement. She's going to do it before that.
They're the outer limits, and we would normally move a lot quicker than that.
Right, okay. Thank you. I'll leave it there on that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Does anybody else wish to? Anybody else indicated they wish to come in? Owen Tennyson.
Owen, yeah.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Owen. Still can't hear you.
Broadcasting, we have an issue there. You're showing that your mic's open, but we're not getting any sound. We're just going to go to broadcasting very quickly, see if there's an issue there.
One quick question I'm just going to ask while we await Owen coming in is: are we at the point now where it's almost slightly preposterous to go through this charade of talk about requesting and then parrying about in relation to accelerated passage? Has there? I mean, I asked. I think the clerk took this. I don't think there's ever been a budget bill that has not passed by accelerated passage. But every single time we have to, we have what appears to be an increasingly sort of pointless charade where the minister and the officials say we wish we didn't have to do this, despite the fact that it happens every time, and then we have to go through the charade of saying we shouldn't do this. Would it not be better if we just agreed that this is what happens, or we came up with a different form of a different approach? I know it's not simply for you, Joanne, it's for us too.
It's not for me to say what the correct processes are. I agree with you that we do come every time and ask, and I think it's also the case in other jurisdictions, because it's the time-bound limit of what we're asking you to agree. If there was a process that worked better for the committee, I would be very happy. But
while we're waiting on
just on that point, I think that this committee would not want to lose that duty or responsibility and or power with regards to granting accelerated passage, or at least writing to the Speaker to grant accelerated passage. I think that's a very good thing. What I am always uncomfortable about is the actual wording of the question put to grant accelerated passage, where it deems that we have had appropriate consultation. I am very uneasy with that, because quite clearly we never do have appropriate consultation because of the detail, and for us to actually go through thoroughly the detail, the notes, the commas and everything else, it's always sat really uncomfortable with me that the question that's put to us as a committee, I think, is the wrong question. But I would reserve the right and the power that this committee has in regards to this process, but it's the wording that gets me every time.
I don't think we have discretion on the wording. We can check that out, but I don't think we have any discretion on the wording. And again, it's the time-bound nature of what we're doing and the speed within which we need to do it that means, and I agree, it's a chunky document with a lot of detail in it, so I don't disagree with that. We try our best to facilitate whatever briefing we can provide. So I don't disagree with you, but I don't think it's something that's within our gift to change.
Owen, I think, is now audible, or will be audible.
Should be.
No.
No. Try again, Owen.
No.
No, we do. We
Try again. No.
No. I'm afraid you're not. No. My I suppose final question. We'll wait and see if we can get Owen back in. Owen's wearing headphones. I don't know if that's part of it, but possibly. Has there been specific advice from any part of the civil service whether the executive office or your own department, that would suggest that it would be inappropriate, or that it might be seen as inappropriate for the devolved government to publish a vast spending, effectively we can call it June monitoring, but it is a significant spending programme a week or less than a week out from an election? Are we genuinely comfortable with that as civil servants?
I have not seen any guidance that I would say that precludes that. We have looked at the guidance that is issued, obviously, as we talked the last time, from the Executive Office to officials. It does make it clear that it is on a case-by-case basis. It also says that the Executive should continue to function as usual. The June monitoring round is entirely usual, and it has no direct impact on the UK government election.
But it's not functioning as usual in the sense that it's a pre-election period. If it was functioning as usual, there wouldn't be any pre-election guidance.
Yes, but the guidance is quite clear about the normal. In fact, if I can read it, so the Executive and the Assembly will continue to function during the election campaign, and officials
continuing
should
continue to function. Obviously, I mean, ministers have been in the Assembly chamber, but continue to function is a different thing from a massive programme of spending, which is what.
It's not a massive programme of spending. The budget would have been the massive programme of spending. It is changes to that. It is routine that we make these changes. And
£250 million is quite significant. Would we understand that departmental officials would be responsible for example, publicising this? Would press officers be asked to send press releases and set up media opportunities for ministers to announce this spending days from an election? Is that genuinely the position?
I honestly, I mean, yes, we would announce the outcome of the June monitoring round. The tone of those press releases would be carefully gauged to make sure it was appropriate. And we also have to gauge, the impact on the UK election and weigh that against the importance of providing that clarity for departments. The guidance is clear that you consider things on a case-by-case basis. We have considered the guidance as our Minister has and determined that we think it's appropriate. If there is something to that contrary, then that could also be considered, but at this point in time, that's our position.
I personally find it very strange that given that it is a matter of days, given that accounting officers are aware of the amount of money, we've just said it, you've confirmed it here today. Now, I know that isn't specific departmental allocations. I think there would be a risk of bringing the civil service into disrepute, frankly, if there was a situation in which civil service press officers, for example, were facilitating large-scale media opportunities around spending allocations days from an election. I think that would be a shocking position.
As I said, the media engagement would be carefully gauged to ensure that this is about informing the Assembly of the allocations and ensuring that the departments have that certainty. And as I did say before, accounting officers cannot work on the assumption that they will get any allocations until those have been confirmed. They must live within the budget they have been given until the point of time when the Executive agrees additional funding for them.
Given the differences between doing it, say, so if it was on the 1st of, say, it was agreed on the Thursday the 27th at the Executive, and then announced immediately afterwards, or on the Friday or the Monday, that would be 1 week. 1 week between this being agreed and it being publicised. Are we genuinely saying the devolved government will crash to a halt and accounting officers, the public services will crash because they don't get confirmation? I find it baffling, genuinely baffling.
We haven't said that anything will crash. What we've said is that the certainty is important for departments. It is a judgment.
This is pre-election guidance.
The pre-election guidance does not preclude this, and according to my reading of it, and I have not seen anything which would suggest otherwise. It is a judgment. Can I suggest the department goes to the head of the civil service, who is being blocked, by the way, from appearing at this committee by the First and Deputy First Minister, and get a specific guidance from the head of the civil service and the Executive Office as to whether it is appropriate to publish June monitoring days from a general election. I think that would be appropriate. We may have sorted out Owen Tennyson. Owen.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we do.
Perfect. Sorry about that.
More than working.
Chair, it's more of a comment and a proposal than a question, because I think officials have covered quite comprehensively the key issues in relation to June monitoring. I'm of the view that monitoring rounds are a routine function of government. It is not launching budget policy. It is reallocating what is not an insignificant, but what in relative terms is a small amount of money. And it is important that that is done as early as possible in the financial year for all of the reasons that have already been set out in terms of giving departments certainty. And for those programmes that are funded by government, which may have a 31st of June deadline, and there is a risk, Chair, that if programmes cease in the absence of certainty, It's a lot more costly to get those programs back up online again after the fact. I don't believe it should be beyond the executive to carry out the basic functions of government in the run-up to a UK general election. And I think that the executive meeting should go ahead on the 27th so that decisions can be made in respect of this. And on that basis, Chair, given the risks that have been articulated by officials today, it would be my view that we should write to the First and Deputy First Minister as a Finance Committee to make that view clear, because I don't think it's acceptable, frankly, that not only can this committee not get a response from the Executive Office, but neither, it seems, can the Finance Minister on an issue that is too serious for this kind of dysfunction, frankly.
Can I be clear on what you're actually asking for? You're asking for the committee to write to the Executive Office asking what I mean, if you're asking that the committee should write to the Executive Office asking for the position on June monitoring and their view on the appropriateness or otherwise of publishing it before an election, which is, I think, what you're saying, I think that's a reasonable thing to do.
Happy to do that, Chair, but I mean, I don't see any reason why the First and Deputy First Minister can't at least issue a response to the Finance Minister, and I don't see any reason why the executive meeting to consider this issue, which is of vital importance for our public finances, shouldn't take place.
You should say it's ultimately, they don't write, the First and Deputy First Minister don't write the pre-election guidance. That's effectively signed off, as I understand it, by the head of the civil service. They interpret it, ministers interpret it.
It is, Chair, but ministers ultimately make the decisions around the interpretation of that guidance.
As I just said, indeed, as I just said. Okay, Deirdre Hargey.
Yeah, no, I just concur just with the comments that Owen made, that I do think this is the normal function. I think it's essential for the reasons that have been pointed out by the officials that are here today. I know the impact on the ground, even of organisations that are waiting to hear. We've heard the Health Minister and other ministers in the main Assembly chamber that they need that certainty. It's called June monitoring. We've known for the last 2 months that it's going to come in June. And I would much prefer that if it was to come by next week, that then there can be the oral statement in the Assembly before we do go into recess, if that's possible. So, I mean, it is just to say that that's where my view on this is, that it is the normal run-of-the-mill in terms of the grand scheme of funding that we do deal with in the overall budget. And we knew that it was coming. I mean, we've been talking about it for the last 2 months on this committee, and we just need to get on with it in terms of hopefully TEO agreeing to put it on the agenda, and that this money vitally can be allocated and give that certainty next Thursday.
Steve Aiken, did you want to come in? Did you indicate to come in, Steve?
Yeah. No, sorry. Comms links are pretty bad here at the moment. I don't know what's going on. No, it's sort of I agree. My concern about this whole process is the lack of certainty over what's in the sort of June monitoring round. And I'm glad that we've had some clarification from Joanne that it's around about 250 million, which I understand that that's the figure that's being talked about for various departments to do the rest of it. Now, my concern is if it's not tabled in front of the Executive Office, what happens? And I think there has to be a concern there. But I also feel that bringing it just before sort of an election is also an issue that we should have cognizance of as well. Now, I hear members saying that a lot of this is normal run-of-the-routine business. It's an election, and we've already been told that the programme for government is not going forward because it's of PERDA and for what's going on with government leading up to the election. Just seems a bit strange that we're doing the same thing here with sort of the budget. But those are just my views.
So, can I suggest that I think we, as per a couple of linked suggestions, we will write to the Executive Office to get guidance on their interpretation of whether June monitoring is on the status of June monitoring and how it interacts with pre-election guidance. Can I also suggest that we, particularly given there's some doubt over whether we're going to have the head of the civil service in front of us next Wednesday, we write to the head of the civil service to ask for her view, because it is ultimately the head of the civil service who writes and is responsible for the impartiality of the civil service. And that is ultimately what's at stake here, is the impartiality of the civil service, not what individual ministers think, the impartiality of the civil service. I will put on my record my view that I do not think it is a defensible or plausible situation that spending £250 million of public money days from an election when no plausible argument has been forwarded that announcing that money 72 hours later would somehow result in the discontinuation of services. I don't think that has been claimed. I don't think it would be credibly claimed by these officials. So I personally think there's a very strong argument that doing this days from an election would be, I think, at best, compromising of civil service impartiality. I think it would be important to get the head of civil services.
Chair, surprisingly enough, I agree with you.
Okay, that's through the chair, Deirdre.
I want to put on record that I believe there is plausible arguments that have been given by officials who work on this on a daily basis in terms of bringing these processes forward on an annual basis. As I said, it's called June monitoring. We know that it's been coming and it was going to come in June. We also knew that in the context that there was going to be an election. I do believe this is the normal run of what happens in this period every single year. But also to add to the letter, no problem with the letter, there was a suggestion that Owen had made as well. So I think that addendum needs to be added to the letter also.
So, let me put on the record, I don't think anybody would say that it is not essential that we get money dispersed. It clearly is. But given the state of public services and the fact that people are expecting it, what I said was, and I remain of this view, the idea that 72 hours or whatever it is difference, or even a week's difference between this money being announced and allocated, the idea that is going to lead to specific services or programmes being discontinued, which is the claim or implication that's been made, I just don't find that plausible. I don't, I'm afraid. It's literally a few days, and in the few days, what's at stake is civil service impartiality. Paul Frew and then Owen Tennyson.
Yeah, I think are we conflating two issues here? So if the budget bill's not passed, we run out of the 65,000 or 65%.
Talking about June monitoring, not the budget bill.
Well, there is two aspects. There's the budget bill, which will be next week too, and the same political arguments could be used for that. But then you have the June monitoring round. I think there's more potential of departments running out with regards to their 65% rather than the reallocation of £250 million through June monitoring round. I am happy to support the letter seeking clarification around this period of PERDA and what civil service and even ministers should do with regards to guidance. But to be honest with you, I would be the first person criticising the department if we didn't have June monitoring rounds in June. So I'm not against June monitoring round. I'm not against the timing, but I am supportive of you seeking the clarification the department or the committee should require.
Owen Tennyson.
Thank you, Chair. Again, it was just to associate myself more so with Deirdre's remarks. I mean, I have every confidence in the ability of officials to manage decision making that happens in the pre-election period and communicate that in a way which upholds the impartiality of the civil service. I believe that is entirely possible in this instance. And I think, in fairness, we've glossed over, and Deirdre gave the example of those third sector organisations who may need that certainty and may have project deadlines, etc., that will be affected. It's also true that if ministers are going to have to make decisions about stopping certain services to live within budget, the sooner that they can take those decisions, the better, because the later you leave that in the financial year, the deeper those cuts may have to be. And whilst on the face of it, a few days or a couple of weeks might not seem much, in a tight budget scenario, it can be not insignificant. So I don't believe that there is any reason not to proceed with this. I don't think that every time an election is called at a UK level, government in Northern Ireland should grind to a halt. And so therefore I remain steadfast to my view that it is in everybody's interest that this progresses at pace and before the election.
Okay, I think we've all aired our views fairly fulsomely on this, and we have agreed actions going forward. I should just say for the record, I don't think there's any arguable reason that a budget bill or a main estimate shouldn't proceed. I think they do much more closely qualify as routine. Part of the reason I know that is, and this is like from experience as a civil servant myself, I know for a fact there aren't going to be too many journalists who write about main estimates or the budget bill, because they never do. There will be journalists who write about and cover lots of extra money being allocated to departments, and anybody in this room who pretends that isn't the case, I'm afraid, is being disingenuous. Those points have been well put on the record. We will correspond with the head of the civil service and the First and Deputy First Minister for clear views on the points that have been raised today in terms of civil service impartiality and the June monitoring round, and I think we'll leave it at that. Unless anybody has any other questions, I think we've mostly exhausted our evidence session. In that case, thank you very much, Joanne McBurney, Patrick Neeson and Angela Ross.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you very much to Hansard for recording that. Now, the next item, I think, is draft forward work. So the draft forward work programme is, we've discussed at length the evidence session for next week, or the hopeful evidence session we have next week. And so we're due to have the briefing, which we've discussed. Now, the additional bit that we have discussed is around our evidence session on civil registration and getting NISRA or the GRO in.
So, Chair, I've
other proposal, yes.
I've other bits I'm going to go to, but I'll come to that one first.
Yes.
We look like we can get a plan for the 3rd of July. We can get room 30 all day that day. I'm not suggesting it's an all-day meeting. I'm suggesting on the 3rd of July we start an hour earlier. This room, as members know, is difficult to schedule in, so we'll reschedule for the 3rd of July in room 30. We'll start an hour early and we'll bring GRO in. If members are content to agree to that. So that just modifies the 3rd of July.
Okay, for people coming in online, room 30?
Yeah, that'll be fine. That'll be fine, yeah. It's just that we have a room. It's just that we have the room and we can get it at the time we want it.
Okay.
So the other things I would flag up are pretty much we've covered, I think, everything almost.
Yep.
But September, what I'd like to ask members for is if members are content that we start populating September's forward work programme. So we have a number of things we want to ask the department, whether or not they'd be able to bring briefing forward for that period. So what we'll do is the first forward work programme we bring in September, possibly even if we can get a few things before we finish in July. We'll start populating that. If members are content, we'll go ahead and proactively do that.
Okay.
It's just because that'll include the discussions we had at our planning day and stuff, so
Yeah.
start to put some meat around those.
Sure, we'll also try and do, our plan in September would be to have a proper full prioritising session.
Yeah.
So we'll bring back what we'd previously decided, what we've done with work around that, and then we'll start doing priorities as well.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Grand. Okay.
And then you'll bring in, the stuff around hospitality.
Yes.
We're thinking of that, I'm assuming.
Looking to do that as
September,
a
well,
broader event, plus then looking at where other pressure
sectors.
points are as
Okay.
well.
Sound.
Okay. And on, so we've done GRO.
So GRO will be 3rd of July.
Thursday.
We'll start an hour early.
Yes.
In room 30. We've managed to book room 30 for that as we've been proceeding. Such are the miracles of modern technology and doing simultaneous things. So that's logged in. We'll get that out in the next forward work programme, so that'll all be flagged up. But I'll do the usual sort of messages to just remind everybody where we've made changes and what times and so on we're working at. And it's fine for Zoom as well. It'll be fine for Zoom.
Okay. The next agenda item is any other business. Do any members of any other business they wish to raise? No. In that case, date, time and place of next meeting is this room,
Still, yeah.
Wednesday 26th of June, hopefully with the head of the civil service giving us evidence, in room 21. So I will now put the question that the committee do now adjourn. Committee's adjourned. Grand. Thanks everybody.
Committee Room 21. Sound.